The wedding dress felt like a shroud, and Delilah Graves was going to die in it if she didn't run. Through the vestry window of the small wooden church in Alta, Utah, she could see the congregation assembling, their faces blurred by her tears and the wavy glass. Her father's voice echoed from the sanctuary, loud and commanding as always, and she knew he was making sure every influential man in town witnessed this transaction disguised as a matrimony. It was August 1882, and she was 21 years old, standing in a borrowed dress about to marry a man twice her age whom she'd met exactly once. Silas Harrington owned the largest mining operation in the territory, and her father owed him money. A great deal of money. Delilah had overheard the conversation 3 weeks ago, hidden behind the parlor door while her mother wept quietly, and her father negotiated her future like she was livestock. Silas wanted a young wife, someone who could give him heirs and manage his household. Her father wanted his debts forgiven and a share in the silver mine. Everyone got what they wanted except Delilah. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass and watched the mountains rising beyond the town. The Wasatch Range stood magnificent and indifferent to human suffering, their peaks still holding patches of last winter's snow even in summer. Somewhere out there was freedom, though she had no idea what that actually meant. She'd never been alone, never made her own decisions, never even walked through town without a chaperone. The idea of running was terrifying. The idea of staying was worse. The door handle turned behind her. Delilah spun around, her heart hammering, but it was only Mrs. Patterson, the minister's wife, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers. "Oh, don't you look lovely, dear," the older woman said, though her eyes held a sadness that belied her cheerful words. Everyone in Alta knew this wasn't a love match. Everyone knew, and no one would stop it. "Mrs. Patterson," Delilah whispered, "I cannot do this." The woman's face crumpled with sympathy. She set down the flowers and took Delilah's hands in hers. "I know it's frightening, but marriage often is at first. Perhaps Mr. Harrington will be kind, he won't be." Delilah had seen the way Silas looked at her, like she was a prize horse he was purchasing. She'd seen the cold calculation in his eyes. "You know he won't be." Mrs. Patterson opened her mouth, closed it again. Finally, she squeezed Delilah's hands. "I'll tell them you need a few more minutes to compose yourself." When the door closed, Delilah stared at it for a long moment. Then she looked at the window. It was barely large enough, but she was small. Her mother had always said she was too thin, too small to be properly attractive. For the first time in her life, Delilah was grateful for it. She hiked up the heavy skirts and petticoats, tied them in an awkward knot around her waist, and pushed the window open as quietly as she could. The frame was old and swollen with mountain humidity, but fear gave her strength. She squeezed through, scraping her arms on the rough wood, and dropped into the tall grass behind the church. The impact jarred her ankles, but she didn't stop. She gathered her skirts and ran. Behind the church was a narrow alley that led to the edge of town. Delilah's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Any moment someone would notice her absence, would raise the alarm. Her father would be furious. Silas Harrington would be worse than furious. But her legs kept moving, carrying her away from the church, away from the prison of that arranged marriage, away from everything she'd ever known. She made it to the livery stable before anyone spotted her. The stable boy was inside the church watching the wedding preparations, and the horses stood quiet in their stalls. Delilah had ridden since she was a child, though always side saddle with proper supervision. She picked the smallest, calmest-looking mare and led her out, not bothering with a saddle. There was no time. She used a mounting block to scramble onto the horse's bare back, her wedding dress billowing around her like a white flag of surrender that she refused to wave. The shout started as she urged the mare into a gallop. Men's voices, angry and commanding. Her father's voice above all the others, calling her name with a fury that made her dig her heels harder into the horse's flanks. She bent low over the mare's neck and rode east, toward the mountains, toward the unknown wilderness, toward anything that wasn't the life they'd planned for her. The wedding dress was completely impractical for riding. The fabric kept tangling in her legs, and the veil had torn off somewhere in the first mile. Delilah didn't care. She rode hard for an hour, maybe more, until Alta was lost behind the curve of the mountains and the mare was lathered with sweat. Only then did she slow to a walk, her own breath coming in ragged gasps. She had no money, no food, no plan. The realization hit her all at once, and for a moment panic threatened to overwhelm her. What had she done? She was alone in the wilderness wearing a wedding dress on a stolen horse. Her father would send men after her. Silas would make sure she was found and dragged back to face consequences she couldn't bear to imagine. But she wasn't going back. That was the one thing she knew with absolute certainty. She would die out here before she married that man. The terrain grew rougher as she traveled. Delilah followed what looked like an old mining road, though it was barely more than a trail through the scrub brush and pine trees. The August sun beat down mercilessly, and she had no water. By mid-afternoon, her lips were cracked and her head was pounding. The mare needed rest, and so did she. She found a small creek in a sheltered canyon and slid off the horse's back, her legs nearly buckling. The mare drank greedily while Delilah knelt beside her and cupped water to her own mouth. It was cold and sweet and tasted like salvation. She splashed her face and neck, then sat back on her heels and tried to think. She needed to keep moving. They would be looking for her by now, probably had been for hours. Her father knew these mountains well from his failed mining ventures. Silas Harrington had resources and men who'd do anything for pay. She had nothing but a stolen horse and determination. The wedding dress had to go. Delilah looked down at the elaborate lace and satin, now stained with dirt and torn in a dozen places. It was evidence, a beacon that would identify her to anyone who saw her. She stood and struggled with the buttons down the back, finally ripping them in frustration. The dress fell away and she kicked it aside, standing in just her chemise and petticoats. Not much better, but at least less conspicuous. She was folding the dress to bury it under some rocks when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Multiple horses, moving fast. Delilah's blood turned to ice. She grabbed the mare's mane and tried to pull herself up, but the horse sidestepped nervously. The hoofbeats were getting closer. There was no time to run. Delilah looked around desperately and saw a thick stand of scrub oak growing along the creek. She slapped the mare's rump, sending her running up the canyon, then dove into the bushes, making herself as small as possible. Branches scratched her exposed skin, and her heart hammered so hard she was certain anyone nearby would hear it. 3 men rode into view, their horses kicking up dust. Delilah didn't recognize them, which meant they were probably Silas's men rather than her father's. They were rough-looking, the kind of men who worked the mines or hired out as enforcers. The kind of men who wouldn't be gentle when they found her. "Trail goes cold here," one of them said, pulling his horse to a stop near the creek. "She could have gone any direction." "Harrington wants her found," another replied. He was older with a scarred face and cold eyes. "He's offering $100 to whoever brings her back." $100. Delilah closed her eyes. That was more money than most men in this territory saw in 6 months. Every rough character and bounty hunter between here and Salt Lake City would be looking for her now. "Think she made it this far?" the third man asked. Girl like that, alone in the mountains. Harrington says she's tougher than she looks, the scarred man replied. And she stole a horse, so she's got some spine. We keep searching until we find her or until someone else does. Split up, cover more ground. We meet back in Alta at sundown. They separated, one heading north along the creek, one south, and one continuing east up the canyon. Delilah waited until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely before she dared to move. Her entire body was shaking. $100. They would never stop looking. She crawled out of the bushes and stood on trembling legs. The mare had stopped about 50 yards up the canyon and was grazing peacefully. Delilah walked slowly toward her, afraid to spook her, and managed to catch the trailing reins. She pulled herself onto the horse's back again, every muscle protesting. She couldn't stay on the main trails. That much was obvious, but heading into the deep wilderness without supplies was suicide. Delilah sat on the mare's back, paralyzed by indecision, and realized she was crying. Silent tears ran down her face as the impossibility of her situation crashed over her. She'd traded one certain death for another, only this one would be slower and lonelier. The mare started walking without direction, following her own instincts. Delilah let her go, too exhausted to decide otherwise. They traveled for another hour through increasingly rough terrain, climbing higher into the mountains. The air grew thinner and cooler. Pine trees gave way to aspen groves that whispered in the wind. Delilah swayed in the saddle, dizzy from heat and fear and hunger. She didn't see the cabin until the mare walked right up to it. It was small, built of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney and a small corral beside it. Smoke rose from the chimney, which meant someone was home. Delilah's first instinct was to turn and run, but she was too tired, too desperate. She slid off the mare's back and stood there swaying, trying to decide if she should approach or hide. The decision was made for her. The cabin door opened and a man stepped out, rifle in hand. Delilah froze. He was tall, with dark hair and tanned skin that spoke of long hours in the sun. He wore simple clothes, a work shirt and denim pants, and his eyes were the most startling shade of blue-green she'd ever seen. He couldn't have been more than 25, and he was staring at her like she was a ghost. "Please," Delilah heard herself say, "please don't turn me in." The man lowered the rifle slowly. His eyes traveled from her torn petticoats to her tangled hair to the mare standing exhausted behind her. When he spoke, his voice was low and careful. "You running from something." "Someone," she corrected. "Multiple someones. They are looking for me. There's a reward." He was quiet for a moment, studying her face. Then he said, "You hurt?" She shook her head. "Just tired and thirsty. I'm sorry to intrude. I'll go. Her voice broke. "I don't know where to go." The man looked behind her, scanning the tree line like he expected a posse to emerge at any moment. Then he made a decision. "Get inside. I'll take care of your horse." Delilah didn't move. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." His eyes met hers, and there was something in them that made her chest tighten. Not pity exactly, but understanding. "No, madam, I don't. But I know what it looks like when someone's running for their life. And I know what it's like to need help and not have anyone offer it. Now get inside before someone sees you." She went. The cabin was sparse but clean, with an iron stove, a rough wooden table, and a bed in the corner. A few pots and pans hung from hooks on the wall. There was a shelf with books, which surprised her. Through the single window, she watched the man lead her mare to the corral and quickly unsaddle a large buckskin gelding that was already there, putting him inside a small shelter. He moved with efficient grace, someone used to working alone. When he came back inside, he was carrying a canteen. He handed it to her without comment. Delilah drank deeply, trying not to gulp, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity despite her appearance. He moved to the stove and ladled water from a pot into a tin cup, then set it on the table. "Sit down before you fall down," he said. Delilah sat. Now that she was inside, safe for the moment, her body was shutting down. Her hands trembled as she set the canteen on the table. The man pulled the other chair around and sat across from her. "My name is Owen Zeller. This is my cabin. You're safe here for now, but I need to know what kind of trouble you are bringing to my door." "My name is Delilah Graves," she said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, like it belonged to someone else. "I ran away from my wedding this morning, in Alta. My father arranged it, and the man I was supposed to marry, he is offering $100 reward to whoever brings me back." Owen's expression didn't change. "Why did you run?" "Because I didn't want to marry him." It sounded so simple when she said it out loud. "Because my father sold me to pay his debts and nobody asked me if I wanted it, and I just couldn't." Her voice broke again. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have come here. I'm putting you in danger." "How old are you?" Owen asked. 21. He nodded slowly. "Old enough to make your own choices." Something about the way he said it made Delilah's throat tighten. "Not according to my father. Not according to the law, really. A daughter is her father's property until she becomes her husband's property. That doesn't make it right." They sat in silence for a moment. Delilah studied Owen's face, trying to understand him. He was handsome in a rough way, with strong features and hands that showed evidence of hard work. There was a quietness to him that felt like strength rather than weakness. "What do you do up here?" she asked finally. "I have some cattle." "Do some trapping. Mostly I just try to live without bothering anyone or being bothered." He stood and went to a trunk in the corner, pulling out a folded shirt and pants. "These will be too big for you, but they are better than what you are wearing. There's a screen behind the stove. You can change there." Delilah took the clothes with numb fingers. Behind the screen, she stripped off her ruined petticoats and pulled on Owen's shirt and pants. He was right. They were far too large, but she rolled up the sleeves and cuffs and tied the pants tight with a piece of rope he'd included. When she emerged, Owen had set out a plate with bread, cheese, and dried meat. "Eat," he said. "Then you should rest. We'll figure out what to do after dark." "What do you mean, after dark?" "I mean you can't stay here indefinitely. Those men looking for you will eventually search every cabin and homestead in these mountains. We need to get you somewhere safe, somewhere you can start over. But we can't travel in daylight. Too much risk of being seen." Delilah sank back into the chair. "Where would I go? I don't have any money, any skills. I can't just appear in a new town with nothing." "One problem at a time," Owen said. His voice was firm but not unkind. "First problem is keeping you alive and free. Everything else will work out as we go." She wanted to argue, to point out all the impossibilities, but she was too tired. She ate mechanically, barely tasting the food, while Owen moved around the cabin checking the windows and doors. He was preparing for the possibility of unwanted visitors, she realized. He was putting himself at risk for her, a complete stranger. "Why are you helping me?" she asked again. Owen paused in his movements. He stood with his back to her, looking out the window at the mountains. "Let's just say I understand what it's like to have your life decided for you. And I don't think anyone should be forced into something against their will, especially not marriage." There was a story there. Delilah could hear it in his voice, but he clearly wasn't ready to share it. She finished eating and Owen gestured to the bed. "You should sleep. I'll keep watch." "I can't take your bed." "You can and you will. I've slept in worse places." Delilah was too exhausted to argue further. She lay down on the rough blanket and closed her eyes, certain she wouldn't be able to sleep with danger so close and her entire life in ruins. But her body had other ideas. Within minutes, she was unconscious. She woke to darkness and the sound of voices outside. Delilah sat up, her heart racing, and saw Owen standing by the window with his rifle. He held a finger to his lips when he saw she was awake, then motioned for her to stay still and quiet. "I'm telling you, haven't seen any woman around here." Owen's voice came from outside, muffled by the door. Delilah realized he'd slipped out without her hearing. "You mind if we check your cabin?" A different voice, rough and suspicious. "I do mind, actually. This is private property. We've got authority from Silas Harrington. He owns half this territory. He doesn't own this land, and he doesn't own me." Owen's voice was calm, but steel ran through it. "I haven't seen your runaway bride. If I do, I'll let someone know. Now get off my property before I decide you are trespassing with intent to cause trouble." There was a long silence. Delilah held her breath, pressed against the wall beside the bed where she couldn't be seen through the window. Finally, she heard the sound of horses moving away. Owen waited several more minutes before coming back inside. "They are gone," he said quietly, "but they will be back. We need to leave tonight." "Where will we go?" "I've been thinking about that. There's a town about 2 days' ride from here, across the border into Wyoming, Green River. It's a railroad town, lots of people passing through. You could get lost there, maybe find work, start fresh." 2 days' ride. Delilah's voice came out small. "I don't know if I can. You can." Owen was pulling supplies from shelves, packing saddlebags with efficient movements. "You are stronger than you think. You made it this far, didn't you?" She had. Against all odds, she'd escaped and survived this long. Delilah stood up, pushing aside her fear. "What do you need me to do?" Owen glanced at her, and she saw approval in his eyes. "Help me pack food and water. We'll travel at night, rest during the day. It'll be slower but safer." They worked together in silence, gathering supplies by lantern light. Owen moved with the confidence of someone who'd done this before, who knew exactly what they'd need for the journey. He packed bedrolls, food, ammunition, cooking supplies. He found a hat and coat that might fit her better. He was thorough and careful, and Delilah felt a rush of gratitude so intense it nearly brought her to tears. "Why are you doing all this?" she whispered. "You could get in serious trouble. Silas Harrington has money and influence." Owen stopped what he was doing and looked at her directly. "Miss Graves, I came to these mountains 3 years ago to get away from people who thought they could control other people's lives. I'm not going to stand by and watch it happen to someone else, not if I can help it. Besides," he paused, something shifting in his expression, "everyone deserves the chance to choose their own path, even if it's a hard one." Something passed between them in that moment, something Delilah couldn't quite name. She held his gaze and felt her chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Owen turned away first, going back to his packing, but she noticed his hands weren't quite steady. They left an hour after midnight. Owen saddled both horses in darkness, working by touch and memory. He helped Delilah onto the mare, then mounted his buckskin. They rode out of the clearing with only starlight to guide them, heading north through the trees. The night was cold at this elevation, and Delilah was grateful for the coat Owen had given her. She followed his dark shape through the forest, trusting him to navigate terrain she couldn't see. The horses moved carefully, picking their way over roots and rocks. An owl called somewhere to their left, and something small crashed through the underbrush. Every sound made Delilah's heart race, but Owen seemed unworried. They rode for hours, climbing higher into the mountains. Delilah's legs ached from gripping the horse, and her back was cramping from the unaccustomed position of riding astride. But she didn't complain. Owen had risked everything to help her. The least she could do was keep up. As dawn began to pink the eastern sky, Owen led them into a narrow canyon with steep walls. At the far end was a small cave, well hidden by brush and fallen rocks. He dismounted and helped Delilah down, his hand steady on her waist. She was so stiff she nearly fell, but he caught her. "We'll rest here during the day," he said. "It's defensible, and the horses can graze in the canyon. No one will see our smoke if we keep the fire small." Delilah nodded, too tired to form words. Owen unpacked their bedrolls and set up a small camp inside the cave entrance. He built a tiny fire and made coffee, which he handed to her in a tin cup. The hot liquid helped chase away the chill of the night ride. "You did well," Owen said, settling onto a rock across from her. "Most people couldn't have kept up that pace, especially after the day you had yesterday." "I'm tougher than I look," Delilah said, then almost smiled. "At least that's what Silas Harrington apparently told his men." Owen's expression darkened at the mention of that name. "Tell me about him, about why you ran." So she did. In the gray morning light, with the fire crackling between them, Delilah told Owen everything. About her father's gambling debts and failed business ventures. About the night she'd overheard the deal being made, her future traded for financial security. About meeting Silas Harrington once, seeing the cold possession in his eyes when he looked at her. About her mother's tearful acceptance that this was just how things were done, that Delilah should be grateful to be marrying into wealth and influence. "I wasn't grateful," Delilah said quietly. "I was terrified. He's 43 years old and he looks at me like I'm something he bought, which I suppose he did, or tried to." She looked up at Owen. "Do you think I'm selfish? Everyone in Alta thinks I am, I'm sure, running away from a good marriage, causing all this trouble." "I think you are brave," Owen said. His eyes held hers. "It takes courage to choose an uncertain future over a comfortable prison." "Is that what you did?" Delilah asked softly. "Is that why you are alone up here?" Owen was quiet for a long moment. He stared into the fire and Delilah thought he wouldn't answer. Then he began to speak. "My family has land in Missouri. Big cattle operation. My father had plans for me for my whole life. Who I'd marry, how I'd run the ranch after he died. Everything mapped out before I was old enough to have opinions of my own." He paused. "When I was 22, I told him I didn't want that life. I wanted to make my own way, see what I could build on my own terms. He said if I left, I'd be leaving for good. No inheritance, no family, nothing. So you left." "I left." Owen's voice was steady, but she could hear the old pain underneath. "Came west, worked odd jobs, saved money. Eventually bought this piece of land and built my cabin. It's not much, but it's mine. Every choice, every success and failure, it's all mine." "Do you regret it?" Delilah asked. Owen looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. "Not even for a moment." They sat in silence while the sun rose higher, burning off the morning mist in the canyon. Delilah felt something shifting inside her, some tight knot of fear beginning to loosen. Owen understood. He'd walked away from everything too, chosen the unknown over the prescribed path. "She wasn't alone in this. You should sleep," Owen said eventually. "I'll keep watch. You need to rest too. I'll sleep later. Right now, keeping you safe is more important." Delilah wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her again. She lay down on the bedroll Owen had prepared, using her arm as a pillow. Before she drifted off, she heard him moving around the camp, checking on the horses, scanning the canyon entrance. Watching over her like a guardian angel, though he looked more like an avenging one with that rifle in his hands. When she woke, the sun was high overhead and Owen was sitting in the same spot, though he looked tired. Delilah sat up quickly. "You didn't sleep at all, did you?" "I'm fine." "Owen, you can't keep going without rest." He smiled a little, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, making him look younger and less guarded. "I like how you say my name." Delilah felt heat rise to her cheeks. She looked away, flustered. "I'm serious." You need to sleep. I can keep watch for a few hours. You know how to shoot? No. Then you can't keep watch. But Owen did stand and stretch, his joints popping. I'll rest for a while. Wake me if you hear anything, and I mean anything. Voices, horses, anything unusual. He lay down on his own bedroll and was asleep within minutes. Delilah watched him, studying his face in the filtered sunlight. He had strong features, a straight nose and a jawline that looked like it had been carved from stone. There was a scar above his left eyebrow, thin and white with age. She wondered how he'd gotten it, wondered about all the stories written in the lines of his body. This was dangerous territory, she realized. She barely knew this man. She was dependent on him for survival, and that meant her feelings couldn't be trusted. Maybe she was just grateful or desperate or confused by everything that had happened. But when she looked at Owen, something in her chest felt light and warm, and it had nothing to do with gratitude. She forced herself to look away to focus on the canyon around them. Birds sang in the trees. The horses grazed peacefully. Everything seemed calm, but Delilah couldn't shake the feeling that danger was close behind them. Silas Harrington wouldn't give up easily. Men like that never did. Owen slept for 3 hours, then woke suddenly, instantly alert. Delilah handed him some dried meat and bread, and they ate in companionable silence. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, Owen started packing up their camp. "We'll cover more ground tonight," he said. "With luck, we'll cross into Wyoming territory by dawn. Once we are out of Utah, Harrington's influence won't reach as far. Will he really chase me across state lines?" Owen's expression was grim. "Men like that don't like to lose, and you made him look foolish, running away from the altar. He'll chase you as far as his pride demands, which could be considerable." They rode through the second night, traveling through increasingly rough terrain. The mountains here were wild and beautiful, untamed in a way that made Delilah's heart soar despite her exhaustion. She'd never been this far from home, never seen landscape that hadn't been shaped by human hands. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Around midnight, Owen pulled his horse to a stop. Delilah rode up beside him and saw why. Below them, a narrow valley stretched out in the moonlight. A river ran through it, silver in the darkness, and on the far side was a line of cottonwood trees. "That's the border," Owen said softly. "Once we cross that river, we are in Wyoming." They made their way down the slope carefully. The horses picked their way through loose shale and scattered boulders. At the river's edge, Owen dismounted and tested the depth with a long stick. "It's shallow enough to cross, but the current is strong. Stay close to me." They entered the water side by side. It was shockingly cold, fed by mountain snowmelt. The horses didn't like it, tossing their heads and snorting, but Owen kept his buckskin steady and Delilah's mare followed. The current pulled at them, stronger than it looked, and halfway across Delilah felt her horse stumble. She grabbed for the mare's mane, her heart in her throat, but Owen was there. He reached out and caught her horse's bridle, steadying them both. "I've got you," he said, and Delilah believed him. They made it to the far bank and stood dripping in the moonlight. Owen looked back across the river, then at Delilah. "You are officially a fugitive in a new territory. How does it feel?" "Wet," Delilah said, and was surprised when she laughed. It bubbled up from somewhere deep inside, a release of tension and fear and relief. Owen laughed too, a rich, warm sound that made something flutter in her chest. They rode until dawn, putting distance between themselves and the border. When the sun rose, they were in a broad valley with the mountains behind them and rolling grassland ahead. Owen found a sheltered spot in a stand of cottonwoods and they made camp. "Green River is another day's ride from here," Owen said. "We'll rest today and arrive tomorrow night. Then we need to figure out your next steps." My next steps, Delilah repeated. The words felt strange. She'd never had next steps before, never had to think about her future beyond what was expected of her. I don't know where to start. You could find work in town, boarding house maybe, or restaurant. Green River has a lot of rail workers and travelers. Someone's always hiring. And then what? I just make a life there. Owen was building a small fire. He didn't look at her when he spoke. That would be safest. New place, new name if you want. You could disappear, start over. What about you? Now he did look up. What about me? You can't go back to your cabin. Harrington's men know where you live. They'll be waiting for you. Owen's jaw tightened. I'd considered that. So you are giving up your home to help me? Delilah's voice cracked. You are sacrificing everything. It's just a cabin. But she could see the lie in his eyes. It wasn't just a cabin. It was his freedom, his independence, everything he'd built after walking away from his family. Owen, I'm so sorry. Don't be. He stood and came to sit beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. I made the choice knowing the risks. And I'd make it again. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Owen looked at her for a long moment, and Delilah saw something shift in his expression. Because from the moment you appeared at my cabin, looking fierce and terrified and determined, I knew you were someone worth helping. Someone special. Delilah's heart was racing. You don't even know me. I know you are brave. I know you chose freedom over comfort. I know you laugh in the middle of a river when you should be crying. I know, he stopped, looked away. I know I've never met anyone like you. The air between them felt charged, electric. Delilah's breath caught as Owen turned back to her. His eyes searched her face like he was memorizing it. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were rough and warm against her skin. Delilah, he said softly, I don't want to take advantage of this situation. You are vulnerable and I'm helping you, and I don't want you to feel obligated, Owen. She interrupted him, surprised by her own boldness. What if I don't feel obligated? What if I feel something else entirely? His eyes widened slightly. What do you feel? It was a fair question. Delilah tried to examine her emotions honestly, separate gratitude from attraction, from the strange intimacy that came from shared danger. But the more she looked, the more she realized it was all tangled together, and underneath it all was something pure and true. I feel safe with you, she said. Not just physically safe, though that's part of it. I feel like I can be myself. Like you see me as a person, not as someone's daughter or potential wife. You let me choose every step of the way. You asked what I wanted. Do you know how rare that is? Owen's hand was still near her face, not quite touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth. You deserve to be asked. You deserve to choose. Then I choose this, Delilah said, and closed the distance between them. The kiss was soft at first, tentative. Owen's lips were warm and slightly chapped from wind and sun. He cupped her face gently, like she was something precious that might break. Delilah's hands found his shoulders and held on, and the kiss deepened. Heat flooded through her, nothing like she'd ever felt before. This was choice, desire, freedom all wrapped together. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. That was unexpected. Was it? Delilah's voice came out breathless. I've been thinking about it since you smiled at me yesterday. I smiled at you once and you've been thinking about kissing me. His voice held humor and wonder in equal measure. Maybe I'm impulsive. I did run away from my wedding and steal a horse. Owen laughed, then kissed her again, longer this time. When they finally separated, the sun was fully up and birds were singing all around them. Delilah felt light, almost dizzy with the newness of it all. She was alone in the wilderness with a man she barely knew, having just kissed him, and it felt more right than anything in her carefully planned life ever had. "We should rest," Owen said, though he made no move to let her go. "Big day tomorrow." "What happens tomorrow, besides reaching Green River? Tomorrow we figure out if there's a way for us to stay together or if we have to say goodbye." His voice was serious now, the humor gone. "Because, Delilah, I meant what I said. I'm not going to pressure you into anything. If you want to start fresh on your own, I'll help you do that and then step away. Your choice." Delilah looked at him, at this man who'd risked everything to give her freedom. "I don't want you to step away. You don't know what you want yet. You've been through something traumatic. Give it time, give yourself space to think clearly." He was right. Delilah knew he was. But she also knew what she felt when she looked at him, and it wasn't confusion or misplaced gratitude. It was the first real thing she'd felt in years, maybe ever. "I'll think about it," she agreed. "But Owen, I need you to know something. When I kissed you, it wasn't because you saved me. It was because when I look at you, I see someone who understands what it means to choose your own path. Someone strong and kind and good. That's who I kissed." Owen's expression softened. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, then stood and helped her to her feet. "Sleep now. We'll talk more later." Delilah lay down on her bedroll, but sleep was elusive. Her mind raced with everything that had happened, everything that was happening. 3 days ago, she'd been trapped in a life she didn't want. Now she was in the wilderness with a cowboy who made her heart race, running toward an unknown future. It was terrifying and wonderful, and she wouldn't trade it for anything. She must have dozed off eventually because she woke to Owen gently shaking her shoulder. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Time to go," he said. "Last leg of the journey." They packed up camp in comfortable silence, a partnership already forming between them. Delilah noticed the little things. The way Owen automatically checked her saddle before helping her mount, how he made sure she had water and food within easy reach. He was taking care of her, but not in a controlling way. More like he was watching her back while she learned to navigate this new world. The night ride to Green River was easier than the previous ones. The terrain was flatter here, and they could move faster. Owen kept them to a steady pace, not pushing too hard but covering ground efficiently. They talked as they rode, sharing stories from their lives. Delilah told him about growing up in Alta, about her mother's quiet disappointments and her father's increasing desperation as his businesses failed. Owen shared more about his life in Missouri, his 3 brothers who'd all fallen in line with their father's plans, his mother who'd cried when he left but hadn't tried to stop him. "You miss them?" Delilah asked, "sometimes." "Mostly I miss the idea of them, the family we could have been if they'd just let me be myself." He glanced at her. "What about you? Will you miss your family?" Delilah thought about it honestly. "I'll miss my mother. She wasn't strong enough to stand up to my father, but she loved me in her own way. My father, though," she trailed off. "I think I stopped missing him years ago when I realized he saw me as a commodity rather than a daughter." "That's his loss," Owen said firmly. "His tremendous loss." They reached the outskirts of Green River around midnight. It was bigger than Alta, with more buildings and even some street lamps lit along the main road. The train tracks ran right through the center of town, gleaming in the moonlight. Delilah could see the depot, a hotel, several saloons, stores, and houses spreading out in all directions. Owen led them to a small stable on the edge of town. An older man came out to meet them, lantern in hand. He looked at Delilah with curiosity, but didn't ask questions when Owen paid him to board the horses. "There's a boarding house 2 streets over," the stable owner said. "Run by Mrs. Chen. She's fair, doesn't ask too many questions, and she usually has rooms available." They walked through the quiet streets, their footsteps echoing. Delilah felt exposed despite the darkness and the oversized clothes she wore. Every shadow seemed to hide danger. But Owen walked beside her, steady and sure, and that helped. Mrs. Chen's boarding house was a neat two-story building with a painted sign. Owen knocked on the door, and after a few minutes, a small Chinese woman answered. She looked them over with sharp eyes. "We need a room," Owen said. "2 rooms if you have them available." Mrs. Chen's gaze moved between them, assessing. "2 rooms will cost more." "That's fine." She stepped aside to let them in. The interior was clean and simply furnished. Mrs. Chen lit a lamp and pulled out a register book. "Names." Owen hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "Owen Zeller and Delilah Grayson." He changed her last name, Delilah realized, making her harder to trace. Mrs. Chen wrote it down without comment. $2 a week per room includes breakfast. Dinner is extra if you want it. No drinking, no fighting, no visitors after 10. Understood. Understood, Owen agreed. He counted out bills from a worn wallet. Delilah's heart sank watching him spend his carefully saved money on her safety. Mrs. Chen led them upstairs and showed them to adjacent rooms. They were small but clean, with narrow beds and washstands. After Mrs. Chen left them, Owen lingered in Delilah's doorway. "Lock the door," he said. "I'll be right next door if you need anything." "Owen, your money, don't worry about the money. I've got enough saved to get us by for a while." He paused. "Tomorrow we'll figure out your options, see about finding you work if that's what you want." "What do you want?" Delilah asked. Owen's eyes met hers, and the intensity in them made her breath catch. "I want a lot of things I probably shouldn't. So let's just focus on getting you settled first." He left before she could respond, closing the door softly behind him. Delilah locked it as instructed, then sat on the bed and let the reality of her situation sink in. She was in a strange town with a new name, no money, no possessions, and only Owen to rely on. It should have been terrifying. Instead, she felt more alive than she ever had in Alta. She stripped off the borrowed clothes and washed at the basin, scrubbing away days of dirt and fear. Her reflection in the small mirror looked different somehow. Her face was thinner, sun-darkened from days of riding. Her hair was a tangled mess, but her eyes looked brighter, more focused. She looked like someone who'd survived something hard and come out stronger. Delilah lay down on the bed in her chemise and pulled the thin blanket over herself. Through the wall, she could hear Owen moving around in his room. The sound was comforting. She fell asleep wondering what tomorrow would bring. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was, then it all came rushing back. She dressed quickly in Owen's clothes, still the only things she had to wear, and went downstairs. Owen was already at the dining table with several other boarders. He stood when he saw her, his eyes warm. Mrs. Chen brought out plates of eggs and toast, and Delilah ate gratefully. The other boarders, a mix of rail workers and travelers, paid her little attention. She was just another person passing through town. After breakfast, Owen asked Mrs. Chen about work opportunities. The older woman studied Delilah thoughtfully. "Can you cook?" "Yes, madam, and clean and do laundry." "The restaurant down the street is looking for help." "Owner's name is Mr. Peterson. Tell him I sent you." Mrs. Chen paused. "You'll want better clothes first, though. There's a general store on Main Street. Mrs. Murphy sometimes has ready-made dresses." Owen and Delilah walked to the general store together. The town looked different in daylight, bustling with activity. Wagons rolled past, people called greetings to each other. A train whistle sounded in the distance. It was bigger and more anonymous than Alta, and Delilah was grateful for that. Mrs. Murphy, a round, cheerful woman, was delighted to help. She sized up Delilah with an expert eye and pulled out two simple dresses, one brown and one dark blue, along with proper undergarments, stockings, and boots. Owen paid without hesitation, though Delilah saw the wince when he counted out the bills. "I'll pay you back," she promised as they left the store. "As soon as I find work. You don't need to pay me back." "Owen, I can't just take your money." He stopped walking and turned to face her. They were standing on the boardwalk, people flowing around them. "Delilah, I want to help you. Please let me. You've already done so much. You've given up your home, spent your savings, and I'd do it all again." His voice was intense, his eyes locked on hers. "Don't you understand? I'm not doing this because I feel obligated. I'm doing it because I want to, because you matter to me." Delilah's heart was pounding. "Owen, I know we said we'd take time, give you space to figure out what you want, and we will, but I need you to know that this isn't charity. This is me choosing to be here, choosing to help you because I care about you." People were staring at them now, but Delilah didn't care. She reached out and took Owen's hand, threading her fingers through his. "I care about you too, and it terrifies me because it's so fast, so intense. But it's real. I know it's real." Owen squeezed her hand, then seemed to remember they were in the middle of the street. "Come on, let's get you to that restaurant." Peterson's restaurant was a busy establishment near the train depot. Mr. Peterson, a harried-looking man with flour in his beard, hired Delilah on the spot when she said Mrs. Chen had sent her. The wages were modest but fair, and she could start immediately. "I'll need you for lunch and dinner service," Mr. Peterson said. "Can you start today?" Delilah looked at Owen, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, sir, I can start today." She worked through the lunch rush, learning the rhythm of the kitchen and dining room. The work was hard, her feet hurt, and the heat from the kitchen was oppressive. But she was earning her own money, making her own way. When she collected her first day's wages that evening, she felt proud in a way she never had before. Owen was waiting outside when she finished. He'd spent the day looking for work himself and had found a job at the rail yard loading freight. They walked back to the boarding house together in the cooling evening air. "How was your first day?" Owen asked. "Exhausting." "Wonderful." Delilah smiled up at him. "I've never worked for wages before. I've never been anything but someone's daughter. This feels like freedom." "It is freedom," Owen agreed. "Hard-won and well-deserved." Over the next few weeks they fell into a routine. Delilah worked at the restaurant, Owen worked at the rail yard. They ate breakfast together at the boarding house and dinner when their schedules aligned. In the evenings, they walked through town or sat on the boarding house porch and talked for hours. They were careful to maintain separate rooms, mindful of propriety, but the connection between them deepened with every passing day. Owen was unlike any man Delilah had ever known. He listened when she talked, asked her opinion on things, supported her decisions even when they were different from what he'd have chosen. He treated her as an equal, a partner, someone whose thoughts and feelings mattered. It was intoxicating. One evening, about a month after they'd arrived in Green River, they were sitting on the porch watching the sun set behind the mountains. Delilah had her head resting on Owen's shoulder, his arm around her waist. It felt natural, right, like they'd been together for years instead of weeks. "I've been thinking," Owen said quietly, "about what comes next." Delilah's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "I mean we can't stay in this limbo forever. We need to figure out what we are to each other, what we want our future to look like." "What do you want?" Delilah asked, echoing the question she'd asked him weeks ago. Owen was quiet for a moment, then he shifted so he could look at her properly. "I want you to know that you have options. You've got a job, you are making your own money. You could stay here on your own, build a life completely independent, or you could move to a different town if you want a fresh start somewhere else. I'll help you either way." Those are two options. What's the third? His eyes held hers, serious and searching. The third option is me, us. We could build a life together if that's what you want. Get married, find a piece of land, start over as partners. Delilah's heart was racing. Is that what you want? More than anything, Owen said softly. But only if it's what you want too. I'm not going to pressure you, Delilah. You ran from one forced marriage. I won't put you in a position where you feel obligated to accept another. It wouldn't be forced, Delilah said. Her voice was steady, clear. Owen, I ran away from Silas Harrington because he wanted to own me. Because marrying him would have been giving up every choice, every freedom, every piece of myself. But with you, she reached up and cupped his face in her hands. With you, I feel like I'm finally becoming who I'm supposed to be. You don't want to own me or control me. You want to stand beside me. That's completely different. So is that a yes? Owen's voice was rough with emotion. It's a yes. I want to build a life with you. I want to be your wife, your partner. Her voice broke. I want everything with you. Owen kissed her then, deep and thorough, and Delilah felt the last piece of fear and doubt dissolve. This was right. This was choice and love and freedom all wrapped together. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the town church. Mrs. Chen and Mr. Peterson stood as witnesses. Delilah wore her blue dress and a crown of wildflowers Owen had picked that morning. There was no fancy wedding dress, no elaborate ceremony, no forced vows, just two people choosing each other freely. When the minister asked if she took Owen to be her husband, Delilah said, I do, with absolute certainty. And when Owen slipped a simple gold band on her finger, she knew she was finally, truly free. They spent their wedding night in Owen's room at the boarding house, Mrs. Chen having agreed to look the other way about the arrangement now that they were legally married. Owen was gentle and patient, and Delilah discovered that love with someone you chose was nothing like she'd been told to expect from duty and obligation. It was sweet and intense and completely overwhelming in the best possible way. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, moonlight streaming through the window. Delilah traced the scar on Owen's eyebrow, the one she'd noticed that first day at his cabin. How did you get this? She asked. Fell off a horse when I was 12, Owen said. He caught her hand and kissed her fingers. How did I get so lucky to find you? I think I found you, Delilah corrected. Or rather, my horse found you. Owen laughed. True, remind me to give that mare extra oats. She brought me the best thing that ever happened to me. Over the next few months, they saved every penny they could. Owen took extra shifts at the rail yard. Delilah worked longer hours at the restaurant. They were building toward a dream, a piece of land where they could start their own ranch, their own life. One day in early spring, Owen came home with news. There's a homestead available about 20 miles north of here, 160 acres. The previous owner gave up and went back east. It's rough land, needs a lot of work, but the price is right. They rode out to see it the following Sunday. The land was beautiful, nestled in a valley with a creek running through it and mountains rising on 3 sides. There was a small cabin, not much bigger than Owen's place in Utah had been, and a basic barn. It needed work, a lot of work, but Delilah could see the potential. We could build this into something, Owen said, standing beside her and surveying the property. Run cattle, maybe some horses. It would be hard work, but it would be ours. Ours, Delilah repeated, savoring the word. I like the sound of that. They used their combined savings to make the down payment, agreeing to pay off the rest over the next 5 years. It was a risk, a huge leap of faith, but they took it together. Moving to the homestead was an adventure. They packed their few possessions and said goodbye to Mrs. Chen, who surprised Delilah by hugging her. You did good, girl, the older woman said. You chose well. The first months on the homestead were the hardest work Delilah had ever done. They repaired the cabin, fixed fences, cleared land for crops. Owen taught her to ride properly, to rope cattle, to shoot. They worked from dawn until after dark, collapsing into bed exhausted every night. But it was good work, satisfying work. Every fence post they set, every acre they cleared, it was theirs. They were building something together, equal partners in every way. One evening in late summer, Delilah was working in the small garden she'd planted when she heard horses approaching. Her heart seized with old fear. She dropped the basket of vegetables and ran to the cabin, where Owen was repairing a chair. "Riders coming," she said. Owen grabbed his rifle and they went to the door together. 4 men on horseback rode into the yard. For a moment, Delilah didn't recognize them. Then she saw the leader's face and her blood turned cold. Silas Harrington. He looked older than she remembered, harder. His eyes swept over the cabin, the cleared land, and finally settled on Delilah. Then they moved to Owen and the rifle in his hands. "Miss Graves," Silas said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Or should I say Mrs. Zeller? Yes, we found out you got married." "What do you want, Harrington?" Owen's voice was steady, but Delilah could feel the tension radiating from him. "I want what was promised to me." "What I paid for." Silas dismounted and his men followed suit. "Her father took my money. She was supposed to be my wife." "She chose differently," Owen said. "You need to respect that and leave." "Respect," Silas laughed bitterly. "You stole her from the church. You made me a laughingstock. And you think I should just walk away?" "I didn't steal her," Owen said. His voice was calm, but steel ran through it. "She ran and I helped her. There's a difference. Not in my eyes." Silas's hand moved toward the gun at his hip. "Don't." Owen raised his rifle. "I don't want trouble, but I will defend my wife and my home. You need to leave. Now." The standoff stretched for a long moment. Delilah could barely breathe. Then one of Silas's men spoke up. "Boss, they are legally married. We checked with the authorities in Green River. There's nothing we can do." "I don't care about legal," Silas spat. "A deal is a deal." "The deal was forced on me against my will," Delilah said, finding her voice. She stepped forward to stand beside Owen. "You didn't want a wife, Mr. Harrington. You wanted property. Well, I'm not property. I'm a human being and I made my choice. I chose Owen. I chose freedom." Silas stared at her with eyes full of rage and something else, something that might have been hurt pride. "Your father is ruined because of you. His debts destroyed him. Did you know that?" Delilah felt a pang of guilt, but she pushed it aside. "My father destroyed himself with his poor decisions. I'm not responsible for his choices, and I won't sacrifice my life to fix his mistakes. You selfish little, that's enough." Owen's voice cracked like a whip. "You've said your piece. Now get off my land." For a moment, Delilah thought Silas would draw his gun. She saw him weighing his options, calculating whether revenge was worth the risk. Finally, he stepped back. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is." Owen lowered the rifle slightly but kept it ready. "It's been over since the day she ran. You just didn't want to accept it. Go home, Harrington. Find someone who actually wants to marry you." Silas's face flushed dark red. He remounted his horse with jerky, angry movements. His men followed suit. They rode out of the yard at a gallop, kicking up dust. Delilah and Owen stood together watching until they disappeared over the hill. Only then did Delilah realize she was shaking. Owen set down the rifle and pulled her into his arms. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "He won't come back." "How do you know?" "Because we called his bluff. He wanted to intimidate us, make us afraid, but we stood our ground. Men like that, they move on to easier targets." Delilah pulled back to look at him. "What if you are wrong? What if he comes back with more men? Then we'll deal with it." Owen cupped her face in his hands. I'm not going to let anyone take you from me. Not Harrington, not your father, not anyone. You are my wife, and this is our home. We'll defend it if we have to." His certainty steadied her. Delilah took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay, okay, you are right. It's over." And it was. Days passed, then weeks, and Silas Harrington didn't return. Eventually, Delilah stopped looking over her shoulder every time she heard horses. She let herself believe that this life she'd built with Owen was real and permanent. As fall arrived, painting the mountains in gold and crimson, Delilah discovered she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks but hadn't been certain until the doctor in Green River confirmed it. She rode home slowly, cradling the news like something precious and fragile. Owen was working on the barn roof when she returned. He climbed down when he saw her, concern on his face. "What did the doctor say? Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Delilah dismounted and walked into his arms. "Owen, we are going to have a baby." She felt him go still. Then he pulled back to look at her face, his eyes wide. "A baby? Are you sure?" "The doctor is sure. Sometime in early spring, he thinks." Owen let out a whoop of joy and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around. Delilah laughed, clutching his shoulders. When he set her down, his eyes were bright with tears. "We are going to be parents," he said wonderingly. "You and me?" "Scared," Delilah asked. "Terrified," Owen admitted. "But also the happiest I've ever been. We're going to have a family, Delilah. A real family built on love and choice." That winter was hard. The snow came early and stayed late. They were snowed in for weeks at a time, just the two of them in the small cabin. But those months became some of Delilah's most treasured memories. They talked for hours by the fire, made plans for the baby, for the ranch, for their future. Owen read to her from the books he'd brought from his old cabin, and Delilah taught him songs her mother had sung to her as a child. She grew large with the baby, and Owen was endlessly patient with her mood swings and physical discomfort. He rubbed her swollen feet, brought her water in the middle of the night, never complained when she woke him with her restless movements. "I love you," she told him one night as they lay in bed, her back pressed against his chest and his hand spread over her swollen belly. "I don't think I ever really understood what love was before I met you." "I love you too," Owen said. He kissed her shoulder. "You and this baby, you are my whole world." Their son was born on a bright April morning. The doctor had come out to the homestead a week earlier and was staying in town, ready to be called when labor started. But the baby came fast, and Owen delivered him with shaking hands and tears streaming down his face. "It's a boy," he said, his voice choked with emotion as he placed the squalling infant in Delilah's arms. "We have a son." Delilah looked down at the tiny red face and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. This was her son, hers and Owen's. A child born from love and choice who would grow up free to make his own decisions. "What should we name him?" Owen asked. They discussed names endlessly over the winter, but Delilah knew immediately what felt right. "Samuel," she said. "After your grandfather, the one who taught you to love the land." Owen's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Samuel Zeller. It's perfect." The first year of Samuel's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Owen was a devoted father, getting up with the baby so Delilah could rest, learning to change diapers and mix formula when Delilah's milk wasn't enough. They took turns walking Samuel when he was fussy, sang to him, marveled at every tiny development. The ranch grew too. They added more cattle, cleared more land. Owen hired a few seasonal workers during busy times, and Delilah managed the household finances with careful precision. They were making it work, building something sustainable and good. On a warm summer evening when Samuel was 18 months old, Delilah was sitting on the porch watching Owen play with their son in the yard. Samuel was toddling around on chubby legs, giggling as Owen pretended to chase him. The sound of her son's laughter and her husband's deeper chuckle filled the air. Mrs. Chen came to visit sometimes, making the long trip from Green River. She'd become something like a grandmother to Samuel, and Delilah valued her friendship and advice. On one such visit, she and Delilah sat on the porch while Owen took Samuel to see the new calves. "You've built a good life here," Mrs. Chen said, watching them go. "I'm proud of you, girl." "I couldn't have done it without Owen," Delilah said. "He gave me the chance to choose." "He loves you," Mrs. Chen agreed. "But don't sell yourself short. You are the one who had the courage to run, to take the risk. Many women stay in situations they hate because it's easier than facing the unknown." "I was terrified," Delilah admitted. "That morning in the church, I thought I might die from fear, but staying felt worse than running. And now," Delilah smiled, "now I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." As Samuel grew, Delilah sometimes thought about her mother, wondered if she was still alive, if she ever thought about her runaway daughter. She'd written a letter once, carefully worded to not reveal her location, just to let her mother know she was alive and well. She'd never received a response. Owen noticed her melancholy on those days and would hold her close. "You can't change the past," he'd remind her gently. "You can only move forward." And they did move forward. When Samuel was 3, they started planning for another child. Delilah's second pregnancy was harder than the first, and she was often sick. But Owen was there through it all, patient and supportive. Their daughter was born on a cold February night. The doctor made it this time, and the delivery was faster than Samuel's had been. When Owen placed the tiny girl in Delilah's arms, she looked at her daughter's face and saw her own features reflected back. "What should we call her?" Owen asked. "Hope," Delilah said immediately. "Her name is Hope." Owen kissed her forehead. "Hope Zeller, perfect." Life on the ranch continued to grow and evolve. Samuel was a bright, curious child who followed his father everywhere, learning about cattle and horses and the land. Hope was quieter, more thoughtful, but with a core of steel that reminded everyone of her mother years past. The ranch prospered. They added on to the cabin, building extra bedrooms and a proper kitchen. They bought more land, expanded their herd. Owen's skill as a rancher became known in the territory, and neighboring homesteaders sought his advice. Delilah started a small business selling vegetables and preserves in Green River. It wasn't much, but it was hers, something she'd built with her own hands and effort. The money went into a savings account for the children's education, because both she and Owen were determined that Samuel and Hope would have choices in their lives. One evening, when Samuel was 10 and Hope was 7, they were all sitting around the dinner table. Samuel was talking excitedly about a wild horse he'd seen up in the hills, begging his father to help him catch and train it. Hope was quietly drawing in a notebook, her tongue sticking out in concentration. Owen caught Delilah's eye across the table and smiled. It was a smile full of love and satisfaction and contentment. This was their life, the one they'd built together from nothing. This was everything they dreamed of and more. Later, after the children were in bed, Delilah and Owen sat on the porch as they had countless times before. The stars were bright overhead and a cool breeze carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. "You ever regret it?" Delilah asked. "Giving up your old life to help me?" Owen pulled her closer, his arms solid around her shoulders. "Not for 1 second. You gave me something I didn't even know I was looking for." "What's that?" "A partner. A family. A reason to build something that matters." He paused. "I was content before, living alone up in those mountains, but I wasn't happy, not really. You showed me what happiness actually feels like." Delilah rested her head on his shoulder. I was so scared that day I ran. I had no idea what I was doing or where I'd end up, but somehow I found exactly what I needed. We found each other, Owen corrected, and we chose each other every day since. I'll keep choosing you, Delilah promised. Every day for the rest of my life. And I'll keep choosing you, Owen replied, kissing the top of her head. As the years continued to pass, their children grew into remarkable young people. Samuel inherited his father's love of the land and his mother's determination. At 18, he was already managing large portions of the ranch operation and talking about expanding into horse breeding. He was tall and strong, with Owen's blue-green eyes and Delilah's dark hair. Hope, at 15, was proving to be as independent as her mother had been. She wanted to become a teacher, to help other children learn and grow. She studied voraciously, and Owen and Delilah were saving to send her to a teaching college in Salt Lake City when she was old enough. One day, a lawyer appeared at the ranch with papers. Delilah's father had died, and in his will he'd left her a small sum of money along with a letter. Delilah opened the letter with shaking hands, Owen standing supportively beside her. The letter was short. Her father acknowledged that he'd been wrong to try to force her into marriage with Silas Harrington. He admitted that his pride and desperation had blinded him to what was best for his daughter. He said he was proud of what she'd built, that he'd kept track of her from a distance over the years, and that he hoped she could forgive him. Delilah cried as she read it, years of complicated emotions pouring out. Owen held her as she wept, not trying to fix it or make it better, just being there. He waited too long to say this, Delilah said when she could speak again, but at least he said it. That's something, Owen agreed. Not enough, maybe, but something. They used the money from her father's estate to expand the children's education funds and to finally build the proper ranch house they'd always dreamed of. It took 2 years to complete, but when it was done, it was everything they'd hoped for. Large enough for their family and any guests, with windows that looked out over the mountains and a wide porch perfect for watching sunsets. On the day they moved in, Delilah stood in the doorway of her new home and marveled at how far she'd come. From that terrified girl in a wedding dress, running from a forced marriage, to this woman standing in a house she and her husband had built together. A woman with children she loved, a thriving business, and a partner who respected and cherished her. Samuel and Hope had grown up hearing the story of how their parents met, though Delilah and Owen had softened some of the harsher details. They knew their mother had run from an arranged marriage, and their father had helped her escape. They knew about the difficult journey to Green River and the choice their parents had made to build a life together. That's so romantic, Hope had sighed when she was younger. That's so dangerous, Samuel had countered. What if Dad hadn't been home when Mom showed up at his cabin? But he was, Delilah had said firmly, and everything worked out exactly as it was supposed to. As their 25th wedding anniversary approached, Samuel and Hope planned a surprise celebration. They invited friends and neighbors, decorated the house, prepared a feast. When Delilah and Owen returned from a routine trip to town, they found their home filled with people and laughter. "You did this?" Delilah asked her children, tears in her eyes. "You and Dad have given us so much," Hope said, hugging her mother. "We wanted to give you something back." That evening, as the party wound down and guests departed, Delilah and Owen found themselves alone on the porch once again. It had become their place, their ritual. No matter how busy life got, they made time to sit together and watch the stars. 25 years, Owen said wonderingly. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you stumbled into my clearing on that stolen mare." "Best horse theft I ever committed," Delilah said with a smile. Owen laughed. "I'm glad you think so. I'm pretty fond of the results myself." Delilah took his hand, threading her fingers through his the way she had that day on the street in Green River a lifetime ago. "Do you remember what you told me? That everyone deserves the chance to choose their own path." "I remember. You gave me that chance. You let me choose. And I chose you, Owen. I chose this life, this family, everything we've built together. And I'd choose it again, 1,000 times over." Owen raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I chose you too, Delilah, from that first moment, even though I didn't know it yet. You were always supposed to be mine, and I was always supposed to be yours." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, the mountains rising dark against the sky. Inside the house, they could hear Samuel and Hope cleaning up from the party, their voices mixing with laughter. The ranch stretched out around them, peaceful and prosperous. Cattle lowed in the distance. A coyote called somewhere up in the hills. This was home, not just the building or the land, but this feeling. The sense of belonging, of being exactly where they were meant to be with exactly the person they were meant to be with. As they grew older, Delilah and Owen gradually handed over more responsibility to Samuel, who ran the ranch with skill and dedication. Hope finished her teaching degree and came back to Green River to teach at the school there. She married a kind young man named Thomas, a carpenter, and they built a house in town. Samuel married as well, a rancher's daughter named Catherine, and they moved into the original cabin on the property, the one Delilah and Owen had lived in for so many years. Grandchildren came, a whole new generation of children to love. Delilah watched her grandchildren play in the same yard where her own children had played, and she felt the circle of life completing itself in a satisfying way. She and Owen moved into a smaller house they'd built on a quiet corner of the property, close enough to family but with space to themselves. They spent their days reading, walking, visiting with grandchildren, and always, sitting on their porch together watching the sun set. On a warm evening in late summer, when Delilah was 68 and Owen was 72, they sat together as they had for nearly 50 years. Owen's hair was completely gray now, and Delilah's was silver. But when he looked at her, she still saw the same warmth and love in his eyes that had been there from the beginning. "I've been thinking," Owen said slowly, "about that day you showed up at my cabin. What about it? I was alone up there because I thought that's what I wanted. To be independent, to not need anyone. But the truth is, I was lonely. I just didn't know it until you appeared." Delilah reached over and took his hand. His skin was weathered and marked with age spots now, but his grip was still strong. "I was terrified that day. Running from everything I knew, no idea what I'd find. But then there you were, and somehow I knew I was safe." "We saved each other," Owen said. "You gave me purpose, family, love. I gave you freedom and choice. We built something beautiful together." "We did," Delilah agreed. "The most beautiful life I could have imagined." Owen was quiet for a moment, then he said, "I need you to know something, Delilah. If I could go back and live my life again, I wouldn't change a single thing. Every choice, every hardship, every moment of joy, it all led me to you. And that makes everything worth it." Delilah felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I feel the same way. Running from that church was the scariest thing I've ever done, but it led me here. To you, to our children, to this life. I wouldn't change it for anything." They sat holding hands as the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren playing, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and peaceful, a legacy they'd built with their own hands and hearts. "I love you, Delilah Zeller," Owen said softly. "I've loved you from the moment you appeared at my cabin in that ridiculous wedding dress, looking fierce and frightened and determined. "I love you too, Owen Zeller," Delilah replied. "Thank you for giving me the chance to choose. Thank you for choosing me back." As darkness fell and stars began to appear overhead, they remained on the porch, two people who'd found each other against all odds and built something extraordinary. Their story had started with escape and choice, with danger and uncertainty. But it had become something beautiful, a testament to what could happen when two people truly saw each other and decided to walk through life together. Years continued to pass peacefully. Owen's health began to decline when he was 78, but he remained sharp and engaged until the very end. Delilah sat by his bedside, holding his hand the way she had for nearly 55 years. "No regrets?" she asked him softly. "Not a single one," Owen replied, his voice weak but certain. "You were the best choice I ever made, Delilah, you and the life we built together." "You were mine too," she said, tears streaming down her face. "My best choice, my greatest adventure, my truest love." Owen squeezed her hand one last time. "Take care of our family, tell them I love them, and Delilah, when your time comes, don't be afraid. I'll be waiting for you, just like I was waiting that day you rode into my clearing." He passed peacefully that night, surrounded by family with Delilah's hand in his, and though her heart broke, she knew he was right. She'd see him again, and in the meantime, she had their children, their grandchildren, and the legacy they'd built together to sustain her. Delilah lived another 8 years after Owen's death. She remained active and engaged, spending time with her growing family, tending a small garden, and yes, still sitting on the porch most evenings watching the sunset. She told stories to her great-grandchildren about their great-grandfather, about the ranch they'd built, about choosing love and freedom over obligation and fear. On a clear autumn evening, just as the aspen trees were turning gold, Delilah passed away quietly in her sleep. She was 84 years old. Her family gathered to mourn and celebrate her, this woman who'd been brave enough to run from what she didn't want and strong enough to build what she did. They buried her beside Owen on a hill overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the land and family they'd created together. The headstone reads simply, "Delilah Graves Zeller, 1861–1945. She chose freedom and found love. Owen Zeller, 1857–1941. He let her choose." Their story became legend in the family, passed down through generations. The story of the woman who ran from a forced marriage and the man who helped her escape. The story of two people who chose each other freely and built something extraordinary from that choice. The story of love that started with freedom and grew into a lifetime of partnership and joy. The ranch continued to thrive under Samuel's management and then his children's. The land Delilah and Owen had claimed and cultivated continued to provide for their descendants. And on warm summer evenings, family members still gathered on porches to watch the sunset and remember the courage it took for one young woman to jump out a window in a wedding dress and run toward an unknown future. Because that single choice, that one moment of desperate bravery, had created all of this. The family, the land, the legacy of love and choice and mutual respect. Delilah had been forced toward an altar with a stranger, but she'd escaped and found a cowboy who let her choose. And in choosing him, she'd chosen everything that mattered. Love, freedom, partnership, and a life well lived on her own terms. That was the gift they'd given each other and passed down to their children and their children's children. The knowledge that you always have a choice, that love should free you rather than trap you, and that the bravest thing you can do is choose your own path, even when you don't know where it will lead. And so their story ended not with death, but with life. The continuing life of the ranch, the family, the values they'd instilled. Delilah and Owen lived on in the faces of their descendants, in the land they'd cultivated, and in the love story that had started on a desperate summer day in 1882 and never really ended at all. It simply transformed, became something bigger than two people. It became a legacy, a promise, a testament to the power of choice and the beauty of love freely given and gratefully received. And that legacy would continue for generations to come. A gift from two people who'd had the courage to choose each other and the wisdom to build something lasting from that choice.